Would you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Detzel. Here. Mr. Yoshimura.
Here.
Mrs. Bradley. Here. Mr. Gilbert. Here. Mr. Detzel.
Here.
Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
January is School Board Recognition Month, a time to salute the work of our school board members and to celebrate public education. This special recognition of our school board members reflects our combined commitment to leadership and accountability, assuring that all students succeed. It is an exciting and challenging time in public education. School board members in Northwest Local Schools develop policies and make tough decisions that help shape the future of our education system. They bear the responsibility of their annual budget, roughly 9,000 students, 1,200 employees, and of course, they're all spread across all of our buildings. They are citizens whose decisions affect our children and build our communities. Our Board of Education and hundreds like it across the state preserve the core of our democracy, public education. They ensure that decisions on school programming are made by people we've elected to represent our community's value, culture, and circumstances. Showing appreciation for the important work of the school board should be a year-round process, but too often we neglect to recognize the dedication and hard work of these men and women who represent us. This January, the staff and students of our district are asking all members of the community to take a moment and thank a school board member. Thank you to the men and women who dedicate countless personal hours to ensure the needs of our community and that they're met by our public schools. We salute the public servants of Northwest Local School District whose dedication and civic responsibility make local control of public schools in our community possible. We applaud them for their vision and voice to prepare today's students to be tomorrow's leaders. As you approach this next year and all of the tough decisions that have to be made, please remember the words of Margaret Mead when she wrote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." These books were voted on by our wonderful librarians at the elementary level as the ones that the students would love the absolute most. And each school will receive one donated to them on your behalf. So at some point tonight, I'll have each of you sign all 5 of the copies to be distributed to our elementaries. Please direct your attention to the screen as the students of Struble Elementary want to say thank you as well.
I like Struble because we get to learn new things. I like Struble because we get to meet new people. We like Struble Blue Jays.
And in addition to that, Taylor Elementary up front signed a banner on your behalf to say thank you for all that you do. So make sure you take a second to take a look at that. And to conclude, at your place, please accept our gifts to you as a small appreciation for the hard work and the support of our students. Thank you.
I'd like to take a minute just to thank not only Struble, but everybody. Certainly that video, it's all about the kids. That's why we're all here. And I know the books each year, it gets to me because now I'm getting closer. We have 2 grandsons, and our 3-year-old grandson will just be a couple years, and he'll be attending Montfort Heights. So I just can't wait till the day that maybe he comes home and he sees one of these books, and that'll be pretty cool. So thank you very much. Okay, Jim, do you have a Butler Tech update?
Yeah, Pam. I'd like to bring up Chris Trentman. He's our satellite supervisor for Northwest High School and Coleraine High School. And just have a little presentation tonight.
I met those kids out in the hallway. God, sharp kids.
Thank you for having us this evening. I just wanted to give a quick update on one of our programs. It was Peter Clark's Financial Service Program at Northwest High School. Earlier this year, representatives from all over the state gathered to elect 6 different state officers for BPA. By campaigning and interviewing, the Northwest BPA chapter of Peter Clark's Financial Services class was able to secure 4 of the 6 spots for the 6 offices. This number has never been done before. Usually you're lucky enough to get 1 as a state officer, so we were lucky enough to have 4. With us tonight is Justin Hauser, who's vice president, Trinity Robinson, who's a secretary, Anna Lemon, who is a historian, and Caleb Amofia, who's a parliamentarian. I'm going to let them have a word.
Okay, so I'm Caleb Amofa, and I'm a junior at Coleraine High School. And in my short time in BPA, what it's done for me is it's presented me with some skills and opportunities that will last a lifetime. For something as simple as tying a tie to being able to give a speech in front of thousands of students and lead an organization with over 9,000 students in it. Being able to meet successful and very wealthy entrepreneurs. Outside of BPA, I also play football. I'm in DECA, another student business organization, and also Key Club and Young Life.
Hello, my name is Justin Hauser. I go to Coleraine High School, and I'm also involved in the financial services program at the Northwest location. I'm involved in many things besides BPA at my school. I'm a member of the credit union, which is a student bank that gives us the opportunity to have finance in our school. And then I'm also involved in student government. BPA has done great things for me. It's allowed me to step outside of my comfort zone and really advance in my communication skills and be able to talk in front of people and everything. So I just wanted to thank the board and my advisor and everyone that helped me to get to this point. So thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Trinity Robinson. I'm a sophomore at Northwest High School. I've been involved with BPA since my freshman year. I got involved and it took me all the way to nationals. So right off the bat I found an interest in the program. My advisor helped me a lot, and I want to thank the board for allowing career technical education to be involved in not only Coleraine High School but also Northwest High School. Outside of BPA, I participate in our student government, also our Knights Credit Union, which helps us engage with the different students at our school while also teaching them money management. I play volleyball, and I'm also involved in United Knights. So I just want to give a big thank you to the board, every member of the board, and all of our parents and our students as well, and a thank you to Mr. Clark, our advisor.
Hi, I'm Anna Lemon. I'm a senior at Northwest High School, and I've been in BPA for 2 years now. It's given me so much. For starters, I've never worn a suit or anything business-like before this, and Mr. Clark, along with the help of Butler Tech, has shown me how to be mature for one. It's taught me interview skills to help me get my first job, and it's placed me with so many opportunities that I could never have imagined. So I definitely want to say thank you to everybody that can make this possible. Thank you to everybody on the board, to our advisor, Mr. Clark, and Butler Tech.
ask a question, Pam?
Sure.
You guys have a conference coming up in Anaheim, correct? I hope we can allocate the money for your trip and everything else. Hopefully that'll be in place. But I wish you the best, and take me with you.
That's funded by Butler Tech.
Okay, I belong to Butler Tech.
Yeah, we can yeah.
I don't take up that much room.
I just want to take a minute, first of all, to tell all of you, you look very professional, and you're all excellent speakers. And I don't know if anybody realizes, but to have 4 officers, they were picked out of high school students for the whole state of Ohio. So the fact that the Northwest Local School District has these 4 representing 4 of the 6 spots, that's huge. So congratulations, that says a lot to you and your advisors, and we're very glad you're here tonight.
Congratulations, good luck. Congratulations, good luck.
Congratulations.
All right, son, as always is the case, we'll step outside for a group photo, which is also your chance to lead. So you can come on outside and join us. That friends and family, you can join them.
Can I go in there with group photo so I can?
All right, first item is a certificated licensed personnel item. It is certified retirements and resignations. Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the certified retirements and resignations as listed.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions? Okay.
Okay, what's that?
He won't log in, so you might have to take his manually.
Can you take my manually then? Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Can only happen to me.
Next item is classified personnel items, classified retirements and resignations. Superintendent recommend the Board of Education approve the classified retirements and resignations as listed.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions regarding the classified personnel? Okay.
Yes. I can't even get into the meeting. Oh, now I got, okay. At least I got into the meeting. Can only happen to me, folks.
Joe, is that your yes for the vote?
Yes.
Yeah, not yes on the question. Okay, just double checking. Okay, motion passed 5-0.
Next item is certificated licensed personnel items. Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the certificated licensed personnel items as listed.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions regarding the certificated and licensed personnel? Okay,
Yes.
motion passed 5-0.
Next item is classified personnel. The Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the classified personnel items as listed.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any questions regarding classified personnel?
Joe, how do you vote?
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
Let me get to this later. Be fine.
Next item is curriculum and instruction. It is 2019-20 high school program of study. Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the high school program of study as listed.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any questions regarding the high school program of study?
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
Next item is curriculum and instruction. It is high school American Sign Language 3 course approval. Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the new course for 2019-20 school year as listed.
So moved. Second.
It's moved in second. Questions regarding the high school course approval?
I do.
Okay.
Just a few questions here. Did the curriculum supervisor investigate the course before the changes were made to introduce to the board? Is this the investigation right here? I mean,
This is what was submitted by the teachers for
Okay.
the course. This is the course abstract.
all right.
And we already run American Sign Language 1 and 2 at both high schools.
Okay, here's the other thing I have to ask. According to this course description here, it says, if, in order for the student to advance to the advanced course in ASL, they must achieve a grade of C or better to move to the advanced courses 3 and 4, correct?
Yes.
What if they fail to reach the 2.0 requirement? What do you do with the child then, or the student?
I would imagine that they would be counseled towards some other course. If they have not been successful with the ASL 2.
So
pushing them would be
what
not-
you're saying here is, we've got to find them a different language in order to meet the requirements. So what you're doing here is hypothetically, you're taking the kid, and the kid either says, I don't want to take it anymore, or he's got a 1.0 average. How can they be filtered in to meet the requirements of the foreign languages when he's got to take 3 and 4 when he didn't take 1 and 2? For example, French.
He or she would start back with a level 1 class again.
And that would fulfill the requirements for college?
So it's Spanish 1, yes.
Typically, they need 2 and 2 or 3 of the same language. That isn't a graduation requirement. That is just something that is preferred by many higher education institutions.
So he can take 2 years of ASL, and then if he decides not to take it anymore, he can go into Spanish 1 and 2 again?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
It wouldn't be again, it'd be for the first time because he took ASL 1 and 2.
Okay. The next question I want to ask is, and I'll ask Daryl this, or one of you folks, what languages did you cut out of foreign language department?
German is the one who we are weaning out.
German was cut 2
German
years
was-
ago.
It was sunsetted multiple years ago, so I think this year is German 4, and then it's over. So we stopped admitting new students into German multiple years ago, and then the kids who were in German were given the opportunity to finish their program in German, and then sign language was brought in as our third language because that left us
So
with just
German
French.
will be phased out eventually.
This is the
This
last
is the
year.
last
All
And
right.
if numbers don't improve in French, the same thing's going to happen there. We can't run classes in the spending deficit with 6, 7 kids in a class. And we can get online classes that they can take to get their foreign languages, so we can meet the needs of the students in many ways, through teachers in classroom or online if needed.
All right. Last question. I'm sorry to be a pain, but under the situation, what the budget for the class include all materials, supplies needed for course implementation with cost, and it comes up 0.00. Can somebody explain that? It's
So-
not going to cost us anything?
Well, for the teacher, it will cost, but we won't need to purchase anything in addition to that.
Okay, so how many teachers do you have in the high schools that teach ASL?
One in
One
each.
in each high school.
Will that expand then? Because if you get the
So with our,
population up?
starting February 8th, we'll be looking at course selections. And that will determine, based on the number of students that select each course that's offered, whether or not we can offer it and how many sections or teachers we need for that.
Okay, getting back to the German thing, what are we going to do with the German teacher then? Is they,
That
She was
occurred
let go 2 years
several years
ago.
ago.
okay, so there's,
They're doing
They're
online.
finishing their
finishing
finishing
online.
oh, okay, all right. That's all I wanted to ask.
believe we have a motion and a second. No?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any other questions?
No.
Motion passes 4-1.
Next item is district finances. So at this time, in case those of you who are in the audience, there's an agenda outside, a place to put questions down on so we can answer all questions as we go. And there are an additional handout that just explains what we're trying to do. So at this time, the board is going to move out, sit at a different table. If we could have our principals spread out so you're not all at one table. AO folks do the same thing. We'll come down and we'll join you there at the table. All right, welcome to tonight. I really appreciate the community members and the parents that have had time to show up tonight, our administrative team, our principals from their buildings. And what we're trying to do is break this down into 3 sections tonight. We have 2 school-related topics that need to be addressed. One is Struble School Choice Status, and the second is Colerain Middle School, White Oak Middle School, Pleasant Run Middle School, and Colerain Elementary status, and the rating and what is required now of ESSA. So at this time, we're going to bring up Brenda Miller and Chrislyn Turney if she needs to assist, and they will go over what's going on at both schools.
Okay, so stand by the microphone. Mr. Bowling asked me to share with members of the board as well as the community where we're at in terms of accountability designations for our schools. Tonight I'm going to talk about 3 different designations. There's a lot more to this, and I'm going to kind of give the basics tonight. The first is Ed Choice or Ed Options. You may have heard of that. The second we're going to talk about is our schools that are in focus status. And finally, the third would be our schools in watch status. Starting with Ed Choice, the first thing that I think is important to note is this is not new in the sense that it's been around in the state for a while. It's changed names, it's changed rules. Northwest Local has not in recent times had a school designated as school choice. And so I'm going to spend the majority of the time explaining to you what that is and what the implications are for our school district and for Struble Elementary. So currently there are over 60,000 state-funded scholarships to students who are living in communities where the school to which they would be assigned is low performing. We'll talk in a minute about how Ohio defines low performing schools and also how Struble Elementary came to get that designation. Real quickly, because of the safe harbor period in the state of Ohio, which meant that during those 3 years where we had new assessments, we are not allowed to, and the state is not allowed to use data from the 2014-15, 15-16, or 16-17 school years. What that means is that these measures rely upon data from 2012-13 and 2013-14, and then last year's data, 2017-18. So there's a gap in there. For the particular measure we're going to talk about with Struble Elementary, we actually are only looking at 2 years of data. The measured K-3 literacy measure, which is how they became eligible for the Ed Choice designation, did not exist in 12-13, so we really have 13-14 data and 17-18 data. With this particular designation, there are scholarships available to students and families who live in the Struble community. With those scholarships for K to 8, they can go to a private school, students who reside in that area. This does not include, go back a second, this does not include families who are already attending a parochial or private school. So this, we'll go through the criteria in just a minute, but this is something that's a big deal, because if they choose to go and get this scholarship, that comes out of our general fund allocation. So the low performing definition by Ohio, you can be designated because of low performance in the area of performance, which is looking at performance index and is also looking at value added or progress grades on the local report card. None of our schools fell into that category based on these designations. Designations for this particular category are made every 3 years, and so when a school goes into that designation, that's how that works out. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. This particular one is not every 3 years. This particular one is something that is looked at every year according to these categories. Graduation is another way that a school can be designated as low performing. Nobody's in that category in our district at this time. Lowest 10%, another way. And finally, the bottom one is literacy. And that is the one that caused Struble Elementary to be identified as a Ed Choice building. This comes straight from the K-3 literacy measure on the local report card. So, how are they identified? The first thing I'm going to try to explain as simply as possible is something we learned about in late August. So we opened the new Struble Elementary with the Struble Elementary school name, and we thought that they would continue to use the state identifier for Struble Elementary. Made sense to us. We thought that was what would happen. What happened is August 28th, I received a call from the Office of Accountability stating that Struble Elementary, the new building, had to use the Weigel IRN, identification number. They had a lot of reasons for it, mostly because they wanted to make sure that we weren't hiding from accountability requirements, because Struble had been a K-2 school prior to this year. And so a lot of these particular measures with the report card did not apply to Struble Elementary School. Daryl called and spoke to them, tried to understand their decision. Ultimately, they told us we're going to stick with this. So the actual designation comes from the Weigel identification number from the 13-14 and 17-18 school year. Up here you see the data. So Struble actually did get a rating when they were a K-2 building for the K-3 literacy measure. In 13-14, that rating was a D, and in 17-18, that rating was a C. For Weigel Elementary, which only had grade 3, this measure is kindergarten, first, second, and third grade, looking at students who are at-risk readers and moving those students to being no longer identified as at-risk. So Weigel Elementary, with just one grade in that band, had an F in 13-14 and an F in 17-18. So that's how Struble Elementary with the Weigel IRN qualified for this designation. This is really interesting. If you can see it, I hope from the back. So how does Ohio define on track? So they give districts options for how we determine whether or not students are on track in literacy. Our district uses the NWEA, MPG, and MAP assessments to identify students in the fall who are not on track. With that particular tool being used, in kindergarten, we use what's called the MAP for primary grades. You can see we also use that currently in the fall of first grade and the fall of second grade. That particular assessment is read to our students. So when you think about reading comprehension, for example, it's not really testing reading comprehension at the lower levels. It's looking at listening comprehension. When you look at what actual MAP score correlates to being on track. In kindergarten in the fall, it's the 25th national percentile on math. First grade, 23rd. Second grade, 38th. Third grade, 32nd. And then there's this extra piece in the K-3 literacy measure that requires any third grade student in the fall who is not on track to actually get all the way to proficient on the state test in the spring.
Okay, so Brenda, if I could interrupt for a minute. So NWAEA, MPG, just forget about that. It's an assessment. It's a test that tests literacy, is the simple terminology for it. In education, we get stuck in all these abbreviations, and they're hard to understand for somebody who's out here watching or possibly sitting here. This is an assessment that is based on the standards that are being taught in class. So teacher's going to teach, they should have covered this much. They're going to test them and see how they're doing. When you get up to percentiles, could we explain percentiles? Do you understand percentiles, 25th percentile, 23rd? What does that mean to these folks?
Sure. So percentiles range anywhere from the first percentile to the 99th percentile. The 50th would be considered average or typical in a distribution. So the NWEA, Northwest Educators Association, not related to Northwest Local Schools, that is the assessment we use, actually has millions of children across the country who have participated in developing norms, which is how percentile is determined. Okay? So what's interesting is that that last piece of the K-3 literacy measure actually requires students, if we look at those assessments we give locally, to be at the 51st percentile. Obviously, we want our students to be average or better, but that's a big jump from what's required to be not at risk in kindergarten, first, second grade, and then by third grade, looking at fall to spring in 1 year's time, what has to be accomplished. It's a big charge. So, implications of this designation at choice.
Student. Before you get that, can you back up a slide? I just want to make sure that I can paraphrase what I think I heard. That because Weigel was only third grade, that they only had third grade data, and any kid in Weigel who was not on track had to get the 700 score on the state test in order to be considered on track. And that's the only piece of data that was used.
For this measure, yes.
For this measure. The other schools in our district that had K-3, they had K1, 2, 3 data that was all aggregated, which was more information in there. So the fact that Weigel was only one grade level really put them at a disadvantage with that indicator.
Yes, the measure actually, our last year's second grade students and our second grade students at Struble in general weren't counted in this measure on anybody's report card, which is contrary to what I think we're trying to do, is be accountable for all students. Because of the way this is set up, it's a fall-to-fall comparison. So second graders at Struble weren't at Struble in third grade. So they weren't accountable at Struble. Weigel had third graders but didn't have second graders. So they weren't accountable for second graders either on this particular measure. So it's kind of an odd measure. The state is looking at it. They're forming a work task force to really look at this measure and how it's being used in our state. Obviously, literacy is a statewide priority. It's also a district-wide priority. So we're concerned about this data, not just for Struble Elementary, but for all of our schools. We're looking at it closely. So implications, students living in the Struble attendance area, this is going to be for the 1920 school year, that are currently attending Struble, who are assigned to Struble by the district, who are currently attending a charter or community school, that is not a parochial or public school, or excuse me, a parochial or private school, students eligible to enter kindergarten in the fall of 2019 or 2020, and students enrolling in an Ohio school for the first time. All have the ability to apply for the Ed Choice Scholarship. I said this earlier, but students currently enrolled in a private school are not eligible. They would have to have been enrolled in our district before they could apply for this particular scholarship. or meet one of these other criteria. Potentially a financial cost to our district, like I said, up to $4,650 per student can be allocated through this scholarship for students that complete the application and apply. Bigger question, how does Struble get out of this designation? So Struble Elementary School, now K-5, but looking at the K-3 literacy measure, will have to earn a grade of C on the K-3 literacy measure for the next 2 school years. So this current year and the year to follow, in order to come out of the Ed Choice designation. So Todd asked me to show you where are we at right now. This particular measure, because it is calculated from fall to fall, we can fill in all the boxes except for that final one, which is 3rd grade fall to 3rd grade spring. So we know where we're at right now. And with all the data, including the fall 3rd grade assessment, we're at 23% at Struble Elementary, which the chart here on the right-hand side shows you the scale from last year's report card, puts us still in the D range at Struble Elementary. We calculated what would need to happen with 3rd graders in order for Struble to earn a grade of C for this school year. Essentially, 20 of the 56 remaining students who were off track in the fall of 3rd grade, based on their assessments, would need to get to proficient. That's a big charge. If you look at prior data, it doesn't sound like it should be that hard, but if you look at prior data, many of the students who are identified as not on track are far from proficient. And so these guys work their tails off, our teachers work their tails off to continue to move them forward, but this is what we have to accomplish in order for us to have a chance in 3 years' time to be able to have Struble not designated as Ed Choice. Okay, questions about Ed Choice?
I have 2.
Yep.
One, what is the timing as far as how much notice do we get as a district to know that 5 kids have received the scholarship and that will be coming out of our budget, or 10 kids or 2 kids or whatever?
Right. Not really sure what the turnaround time from the state is going to be. Families, it's out there now, the application they can apply for next school year. We have figured out like who will process them and how that will flow in our district, but we can't account for or figure out what the timeline will be from the time it's submitted to the state till when they contact us.
So another, almost, it's not really an unfunded mandate, but yes, it is. We have no idea from year to year how that will affect our budget, because that has to come out no matter what. And then the next question, so let's say, you have, I don't know, 5 students that get the scholarship, and if Struble would come out of Ed Choice 2 years from now, I'm assuming then their scholarship stops, correct?
The way the language reads is that they can continue to apply. I'm not really sure on that. Mr. Yater asked me to get clarification from the state, so working on that. But I'm not really sure if they can continue to stay at their private school, or if they would return to Struble or whatever building they would be assigned to after the designation is removed.
Or they could stay at their private school but pay for it themselves.
Possibly. That's how it works? Got it.
You did just lose the scholarship.
Sure, lots of questions. Go ahead.
There's a couple slides where it showed, a couple slides back where it showed the indication of the school year, and it had 0 of 14 and 1 of 11 or something. What were the numbers underneath? What would that represent?
Here.
A couple slides back. We're showing the African C rating. Right.
Here.
This one, yes.
Okay, so what that represents is out of all the students designated as at risk, 11 of the 45 students at Struble in 13-14 moved to on track. So they were off track in the fall of kindergarten, for example. By fall of 1st grade, they were on track. Could have been 1st to 2nd, 2nd to 3rd. Does that make sense? Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What's being done to assist these students, between students? Are parents aware of the fact that they're not proficient?
This is something that we're sharing right now with the community. We also will notify parents at the school of the situation. You guys want to talk about some of the things you're doing?
Brenda, you want to address our REMS? I think the question was about the specific students that are off track.
Okay.
So I think probably addressing REMS as well.
Yes, we're required to put in place a reading intervention monitoring plan for every student who is identified as not on track. And each teacher puts that plan into a system that allows them to tell us what they're doing to address the concern, as well as to monitor the progress of students throughout the course of the year. Most of our schools in the K-3 range, use another assessment called AIMSweb Plus to monitor the progress of students on specific reading skills throughout the year. With MAP being kind of a 3-time-a-year benchmark, this is one that gives us more current and accurate data in the moment that we can respond to.
And this is not just at Struble, it's at all our elementary schools,
Yes.
Colerain, Pleasant Run, Monfort Heights, and Taylor. So it's like an individual learning plan, like an IEP for each student. Parents will be informed, parents will be involved. They're recruiting teachers as we speak for after-school tutoring for these students. Some of the changes we've made by moving to different schedules and adjusting our schools this year is we have doubled the amount of reading that they're getting in the younger grades. We're moved to all-day kindergarten. Part of what affects us is the lack of kids who attend preschool prior to entering kindergarten. So we're trying to work on that, and part of our plan that we'll work on for the next 3 months of these work sessions is what do we need to do to expand our preschools and make it available in a proximity that is close to all our schools.
Got a question in the back?
Two questions. When you notify the parent of this tracking thing, they need to understand, like this lady and I were talking about, that focus was on the beginning of 3rd grade to the end of 3rd grade, and that I don't want a parent to get so upset that say, oh my gosh, why are they failing? You got to remember, you got to look at it logistically. That started in August and it's going to end in May, but they got another year. You're saying they got 18, 19, and then we got 19, 20 to get them on track. So that needs to be explained and for everyone to understand that. And my second question is, on the $60,000 to $4,650 per student, that's only to a private school. That's not going from Northwest to Wyoming or Northwest to Three Rivers. It's only going from a Northwest primary school into a private school only. That's the only way you can get that scholarship.
The bullets that I used, essentially what you're asking, the answer is yes. The open enrollment, which is how students from our district go to another public school district generally, that is a different animal. We are still required to provide funds when we send a student to a portion of the funds, when we send a student or allow a student to go open enrolled in another public school district.
And are we as a district talking to other districts who are in the A and B range of the same exact pattern? Like, and I don't know this for a fact, I'm just throwing it out there, Ross, Wyoming, are we asking them, are we being entrepreneurial with them and trying to say to them, okay, we're in this position, what are you doing better or different than we're doing as a school? Show us what you're doing so we can pick up some of the things that they're doing that are getting the A's and B's.
It's absolutely essential that we share best practices with one another, both within our school district and outside of our school district. Something that Mr. Bowling encourages our principals to do on a regular basis, and we support as a curriculum department.
So that is occurring. They are having that interaction and they are talking to Ross or Wyoming or whoever it is that are receiving the A's and B's and looking at their actual curriculum. And I heard Mr. Bowling say we're going to get people in after school to do tutoring. Do you need the community? I'm a grandmother. I would more than be glad to sit down and try to tutor somebody if somebody told me what to do. I think reading to your children is the most important thing. I understand parents are under time crunch, they're under stress, but I would be willing to come into the school and take a kid and go helping. And I think, in my opinion, I think flashcards with words, I think that helps. I think the old way of doing, phonics, I think that helps. But I'm old-fashioned, I'm old school. So those are the things that I would be willing to do, and I think a lot of grandparents would be willing to do that if the parents can't do it because of their working situations.
We love to have volunteers in our schools, whether they're parents, grandparents, or members of the community. That is essential to us working together to move our district forward. There are certain positions like after-school tutoring where we pay teachers to do that work a little bit differently, but that doesn't mean that the other piece you're speaking of is not just as important. So that support from an early age, preschool all the way on up, is really critical to us, making sure that all of our students are successful and literate.
And I agree with Mr. Bowling about the expansion of the preschool, and I'm speaking from first experience. At one time when my grandchildren were at Houston in the early preschooling, the way it was being ran and by whom it was being ran, that was detrimental to the community. Now, I haven't been part of that community anymore. I'm part of the Struble and community. But that, if that program, you really wanted to go and run with it, that program got a bad reputation years back in 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
I can tell you for a fact from looking at the data from the last several years that our preschool students that attend Northwest Local School District preschool, over 70% of them come into kindergarten on track.
Good.
According to the NWEA assessments that we use. So we have a high quality preschool. It's rated 5 stars, and there may be history there, but we have been in classrooms recently. There's high quality education going on there, and a lot of rigor too. You were just in classrooms,
yes, I
Dr.
spent
Kessling.
last Wednesday in classrooms all afternoon, and the amount of rigor and the expectations that they have for those preschool students is phenomenal. Students were doing rhyming words. It's no longer play-based. It's academic in nature, and the expectations are very rigorous.
And that message needs to get out to the community because, again, the community that I speak to, all the grandparents, they've got the reputation of not being that kind of a preschool.
We can work on that.
Okay.
There's a lot there to communicate. Yes.
The first one is, I'm just curious how and if redistricting impacts Struble at all. It's my understanding that there are quite a few kids redistricted from Coleraine Elementary that were lower, I guess, labeled as disadvantaged, which would probably fall into the category of some of the underperforming students. I'm just curious if that is included, if those numbers are included in these numbers up here, and if so, you know, because it's my understanding that Coleraine is really no longer a Title I school. I'm just curious if that has any impact on these numbers, and if moving forward, if that will have an impact on performance in Struble. And then my second question kind of pigtails off the Kim's question, and that is, you know, what are we doing not only for those underperforming students? I think there's whatever that, I can't see that up there, but there's 20 or so students, but also what are we doing for the school as a whole? Not just a program, but, you know, in terms of teachers, are they giving any input on some, you know, for some of their issues or questions that they may have, or input to help elevate? Are we right sourcing our teachers and staff in our elementary schools, specifically our new elementary schools? And also, do we have adequate staff in these schools? And also, are we having issues with crowding in any of these schools? And are those issues being dealt with, and if so, how?
So lots of questions in there, Monica.
Yeah, sorry.
First
Y'all
one
know
I'm
me,
going to
I ask a
ask,
lot.
Jenny, would you talk about where Coleraine Elementary is in terms of Title I?
You said something that said that Coleraine is essentially not a Title I school, and that is absolutely not true.
So they're no longer under the 40% threshold of disadvantaged children?
They are, but that doesn't mean that they're not a Title I school. There's rules and there's things that we can talk about. It's a lot of technical kinds of things and reasons, but currently they are operating as a school-wide Title I program.
But have they met, or so are they, just in layman's terms though, are they currently at or under 40% disadvantaged students?
Yes, they are, okay. but that doesn't mean that they're not a Title I.
But I mean, I think it could stand to reason that if a certain demographic was moved out of a particular school and that demographic is shifted to another school, I mean, couldn't we make the argument or ask questions about how that demographic affects scores and such and so many other things at another school?
Oh, we definitely could, but the scores that you're looking at here are not from those kids. This was from Weigel and Struble, as she said earlier. This had nothing to do with the Colerain kids that were moved over.
I guess what I'm getting at, though, is if we have this percentage of kids at Struble currently, and we're adding more of those kids that are put at disadvantage from one school to another, I'm asking you, how does that impact this?
Well, we have the same amount that are not in this qualification, but if you look at the amount of RIMS, they're pretty equal between Taylor, PRE, and Struble. So there's an equal amount through the buildings.
The scores there do not represent the redistrict kids. You scroll a couple, what you're looking at here, that's current data that reflects the students that are there after redistricting.
Right.
And so they're currently at a D, where Weigel was an F before. And
So they're actually performing better because of the kids who were moved.
So that's current data with redistricting.
We will absolutely continue to monitor data. That's something that we do a lot of.
And I don't have them in front of me, I put them in my computer, to be able to have the actual numbers, because I don't want to say numbers are incorrect. But we look very carefully at those numbers to make sure that we weren't really skewing the reduced numbers. That's all going to play out in the next year or so as we watch that. But we are watching that very carefully. And I don't think in School Elementary it dips like it dips below, but we'll be watching to see where that goes. But you can still be a Title I school and receive the funding if you're below 40%.
Sure.
You just have to be above the district average.
Right, and I mean, I completely understand that. I was just asking because I know before the redistricting happened, I had questions around, you know, if we were making sure that we were redistricting evenly across the district. So I just wanted some clarification on that.
Yeah, if you'll go back to board meetings from last year, they showed the distribution and it was equal across the board and approved by state and what they mandate when you divide the schools. We got time for one more question, then we have to move on. We're on topic 1 of 10. Carrie, you had your hand up?
Real quick, do these numbers just include our disabled children who are also struggling, or are these, okay, it's as easy as that. They get choice until the school itself complies and gets the higher standard, or so can a kid actually transfer to a different school, then be forced to change the next year, or do they get a certain amount of time that they're allowed to exercise the choice? Like,
Yeah, so because of this choice, they're allowed to receive a scholarship to a parochial school if one, they're not already there, if they're entering kindergarten or moving in new. Parochial schools do not follow the same guidelines as we do. One fight could lead to removal from a school. So they can be moved back and forth, but you can't just go back and forth. If you go for the scholarship one time and you come back for us a year and then go back, I think my understanding is then they would lose that scholarship.
So do they get to exercise it for 3 years?
Currently, the next 2 school years, we will definitely be in ed choice status for Struble Elementary, so 1920, 2021. If we don't earn grades of C on the K-3 literacy measure, or we fall below on one of those other ways of qualifying, then it could be longer than that.
So
but at a
as soon
minimum.
as the results come out, then they lose their money. You're saying that?
So as soon as we come out of the designation, which will be at the earliest 2 years from now, then they would lose it.
And then the last question was, and so students can opt to go to any other school within our district also? And does the district have to accept them? So if I'm in Struble's district, and I want to exercise ed choice, can I say I want to go to Montford Heights and you'll bus my kid there?
So that wouldn't be referred to as an ed choice scholarship. That would be referred to as an intra-district transfer request, which we do have a process in place for that already.
There was a law in place many years ago when we first started that was called public school choice. That's what you're talking about. That's what I was talking about. I wanted to make sure. 2 different things.
And before we move on to the middle school topic, So yes, teachers are the experts in the classroom. They have common planning bells together where they can share ideals and instructional strategies that work. They can look at an assessment, break down the data, and if the 5 at this table are sitting here, they can say, hey, 70% of your kids passed this test, Karen. Stephanie might say only 10% of mine did. What did you do instructionally that worked versus what did I do? Administrators are working on getting them professional development, but there is a constant communication with our teachers to make sure that they are an integral part of the planning and that they are having success in the classroom.
Okay, I'm going to move on. If there's other questions, I believe there's cards that you can use to write those questions so that we can get back to you with responses. The next designation is called focus schools, or it is focus schools. There's different levels that schools can be identified with. We have 4 buildings in our district that were identified or designated this year as focus schools. Colerain Elementary and all 3 of our middle schools. Colerain Middle School, PRMS, and White Oak Middle School. So again, I explained in the PowerPoint here, it's probably hard to read. What are focus schools? Essentially, focus schools identified every 3 years. There are identifications for schools of either independent, warning, focus, or priority. Independent means what it sounds like. You're doing fine. You get to continue to make choices, your own choices about what you do. The next level, moving from high to low, is is warning. We do not have anybody identified currently as a warning building. Went backwards, I think. Focus is where we're at. Priority is the most severe. So the bottom of the state in terms of performance, focus is the one above priority. So to become a focus school, you meet one or both of the following criteria. So if your groups or subgroups, as the state refers to them, are performing at or below the performance of the priority schools, which again is the lowest, you can be identified. The other way is that schools have subgroups or groups of students that are performing in the bottom 30% for the state, and they had low performance on the gap closing measure. So gap closing measure last year completely changed in terms of how it's calculated. It is now calculated by looking at the performance index, so the level that each student scored on every test that was given determines a performance index score. And the state, based on our state averages for the different groups of students, figured out what that baseline was in 2015-16 and figured out a stair step in their plan under the Every Student Succeeds Act for how do we continue to improve each year moving towards the federal goals. So we look, with this measure, we look at how our African American students, our white students, those are all groups that they identify. African American, white, students with disabilities, English learners. We look at all other ethnicities if we have enough students in that group to actually be held accountable. And we do in most cases, from multiracial to students who are Hispanic, all of those different pieces. Economically disadvantaged is considered to be a subgroup under the federal guidelines as well as our states. So that's how you qualify as a focus school. This particular chart shows which of those different groups our 4 buildings that were identified as focus schools are struggling with. So everybody's struggling in this group here with students who are economically disadvantaged. I had to abbreviate to get it on a slide. So economically disadvantaged. Colerain Middle School and White Oak Middle School were identified as struggling significantly with African American students. You can read across the chart, MR is multiracial, WH is white, Hispanic, everybody except Colerain Elementary struggling there in the middle schools. Asian students, English language learners, students with disabilities, and then they actually call all students a subgroup as well. That's how they look at this. So this is how we qualify for our 4 buildings. Again, how do we get out of focus designation? Focus schools can be removed based on criteria. They can earn an overall C or better. That's for the whole report card. So that school component grade, and a C or better for gap closing, that measure on the report card. So unlike the Ed Choice designation, our schools could earn their way out of focus designation next school year. That being said, we'll talk about the support they receive, but they are eligible to continue to receive that support for 3 years. So that doesn't go away just because they have a good year this year or next year if they want to exercise that. Second way is to meet the subgroup performance goals per state requirements. I talked about those tiered performance index targets for each group of students. They increase every single year, and so by meeting those for the areas that they had not met in the past, they can also work their way out of this designation. Implications, this is actually a positive in my mind. So in the past, when a school received a designation like this, oftentimes it was very much compliance driven. Fill out these forms, do this task, check this box. They're really switching the focus in our state to support. I truly believe that in my heart after listening to the consultant that they've assigned to our 4 buildings. She's been in our schools, she's been on our campuses. Her mission is to figure out what's not working and to help our principals to make improvements to address areas of concern. So she's done walkthroughs already in our classrooms, as Crystal and I have joined her for the middle schools, and Stephanie and I joined her for the elementary school. And she's meeting with principals after those visits to give them detailed data on the observations, but more importantly to talk about action. What are we going to do to address our top concerns? She's trying to prioritize 2 to 3. Sometimes she might do 4. But that's her focus. And then what's really nice about this one is all of our focus schools are eligible for a grant, school quality improvement grant that's out there. I don't know if you want to jump in at any point, but they all decided to go through the process of submitting an application for that grant, and the grants will be awarded in February. Those grants are only open to schools that have been identified as priority or focused buildings. So that's something we're hoping to hear. We applied for about $1.6 million in grant funding between the 4 schools. Another thing that's really positive about the implication is that there's a lot of opportunity for professional development for our teachers. We already had the opportunity partnering with our funds for Making Middle Grades Work to bring in the Ohio Writing Project to start really working with our teachers on literacy strategies and writing strategies across the curriculum. We also have a large contingent of our teachers going to the adolescent literacy professional development that's coming up February 15th. So Megan, as our consultant, is charged with making us aware early and often of opportunities for our teachers to continue to get professional development and grow in their instruction. I think I covered that.
Yep.
There is one compliance piece. It's much less than it used to be, but each of these 4 schools will have to answer 7 questions related to their improvement efforts, and that will be submitted to the state through the CCIP, we call it, the Comprehensive Continuous Improvement Plan that we issue as a district each year. And Jenny's very much leading the way on that one. Okay. I'm going to go, at this point, I'm just going to cover a couple more things and then let questions come in through cards, if that's okay with you, in the interest of time. So we have one further designation, and that is called watch schools. Watch schools, the schools designated from last year's data, Colerain Middle School and Colerain High School. So Colerain Middle School was already covered under focus. They also were labeled as a watch school. Being both, they get all the supports that come with being a focus school because this is a different way that schools can be identified based on, if they take federal monies, they're held accountable and looked at on this particular measure. So with the watch schools, they're looking at specific groups of students that we receive monies for. English learners, students with disabilities, economically disadvantaged students, and gifted students. So if any of those groups of students are not achieving or progressing as they should be, a school can be designated a watch school. This designation happens every year, annually, and again, it uses performance index and the progress measure or value added. There are no additional funds per se for schools that are designated watch schools. So we are working to have Coleraine High School, since they're the one added, take advantage of and be part of things like the consultation from Megan. She's going to be walking through classrooms at Coleraine High School, not because she has to, but because she's willing to help us improve wherever we ask her to do so. These schools have to complete a needs assessment and the decision framework. We are already doing that for all of our buildings in the district. They have to submit an improvement plan to ODE through the CCIP, specifically addressing the groups or group that they're struggling with. Both Coleraine Middle School and Coleraine High School were identified as watch schools because they are not growing and achieving with our students with disabilities to the extent that they are expected to do. So it wasn't gifted, it wasn't English learners, it was students with disabilities for Coleraine High School. Coleraine Middle School had multiple groups that they were identified for on different measures. All right, that was a lot. We are trying already to start some things. I see Jack here, and Coleraine High School looking at major changes potentially to schedule, looking at both Northwest and Coleraine, looking at a redesign, trying to figure out how best to meet the needs of our students moving forward. So we're not sitting back and waiting for this, just hoping it goes away. We're trying to take action and make change so that we don't end up in these categories in the future. I said a lot. Do you want to add anything?
No, they were short, so.
All right. Thank you for your attention. If you have further questions, happy to work with you on that.
Anything from the board on that piece before we move on? Community, since no cards, questions? All right, if you could put up the business PowerPoint. All right, so last board meeting, we had some great discussions on what some folks in the audience had questions about. I had several board members with questions. So we have done some research to get these answers so that we can bring them to you tonight. I need that thing, and then I can move it right. All right, so one of the questions that came across from a board member was, we have a situation at Coleraine High School where left field is basically falling down into a big creek. So we have priced out what that costs to work. So we wanted to work with Coleraine Township. We know that Heritage Park is down on the backside of Old Coleraine, and we priced what would it be to use a baseball field there. Well, it's $275 per baseball game per day. That does not include practices on a daily basis. So we wanted to partner with them. We didn't think that field was being used much. I have some employees who live by it. They said it's empty every time they pass it. So what we wanted to do, and one of these nights Jack is going to present his grounds improvement plan, is take the baseball field out of Coleraine. Put an extended black top lot there for band to practice and other music and other things to practice. But we don't have that option because when I went to school, we didn't have a baseball field at Northwest. So if you go in the middle of the Beavis subdivision, up top is a nice ball field where we played all our baseball games. So the idea was, hey, Heritage is sitting there. It was 4 parks. They've now taken one away and made it a dog park, I believe. Yep. So that leaves 3. So we just wanted to see if there was a partnership possibility. we can't afford $275 a game, and then they're going to want $275 a practice. That adds up really quick, and our budgets just aren't for that. So we're going to take bids out, because anything over $25,000 has to be bid, and we will get bids on what it will cost to fix and sustain the left field line at Colerain High School. So any questions about that? All right. Next is, we've had lots of talks about crossing guards, and I personally would love to have crossing guards wherever we need them. What we have found is a lot of districts do not have them, and it's basically the same reasons. They're hard to find. I mean, think about it. Rain, shine, or snow. Find somebody for an hour in the morning, and somebody who's got some thick skin, can be yelled at, can be honked at, who is going to have heart attacks when kids come riding the bikes as they stop. And then you need an hour in the afternoon, and it has to be a reliable person. So they're hard to find. Getting replacements if someone calls in sick is a major issue from, and I'll show you the districts we all checked with. Daryl and Chris did this. 4 district crossing guards. So Pam asked, do any other townships or police departments hire and pay for the crossing guards? And there was 4, and I'll show you those in a minute. I believe it was Reading, Lockland, Wyoming, maybe Marymount. 9 are hired by the district, and 10 districts alone do not have crossing guards. Pay ranged anywhere from $11.60 an hour to $17.60 an hour. They're hired as classified subs. They work 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon. The one thing we could look at is if we move back busing to 1 mile and strictly enforce it, it would save on routes to help cover the cost. But if you're going to move back and strictly enforce 1 mile, you have to have crossing guards at these major intersections where these kids are crossing. Nobody wants a kid to get hurt. So that's something we have to look at. So districts we checked with, and this is really tiny, so I'm going to get up here and read it to you. And I have to move closer myself. So we checked Mount Healthy, the district pays for their own. Winton Woods, the district pays for their own. Edgewood, the district pays for their own. Marymount, the Marymount Police Department hires them, trains them, and pays them. Wyoming, the city of Wyoming hires them, trains them, and pays them. Oak Hills, the district pays them. Finneytown, the district pays them. St. Bernard, now the district pays them. Southwest, which is Harrison, the district pays them. Lakota, the district pays. Lockland, the district pays. Hamilton City, the district pays. Reading, the Reading Police Department pay. And then Milford, Princeton, Kings, and probably 8 or 9 other districts do not have crossing guards. So we are going to continue to look at this because we have some areas that we need to address. Struble, obviously being one that we've talked about several times here, a lot around the Pleasant Run Elementary area, a lot around the Mumford Heights Elementary area. So the job descriptions are easy to go by. Daryl's got them from other districts. Chris and Daryl will put together what an hourly wage would look like, and we can do that presentation to the board if that's the direction the board would like us to go. I know we've heard strongly from the community that is the direction they would like us to go. So we need to do this sooner than later. What we will need help from the community is, who are these people? Because you're going to know the ones that have the flexibility of being there from 7:45 to 8:45 each morning, or maybe 7:15 to 8:15, and then back in the afternoon. We obviously would fit them in something that has the colors so they can be easily seen, and then rain attire probably also that can be easily seen. So we can get all of this together. It'll come for a board approval, and it will come with an hourly rate, and we'll probably go somewhere in the middle. So if we can coerce from somebody to come elsewhere, or if I put it out and the board thinks it's too high, then they'll give me feedback and we'll reduce it and go from there. But it's a very hard position to find. We can put it on Indeed. Everybody who works for us, just like a volunteer, has to have a background check. So that cost will be figured in, so on and so forth. So they will be individuals that we can trust with our children. Questions about crossing guards? Yes, sir.
You mentioned Struble. What other schools are targeted as far as?
Pleasant Run L has some major concerns on Pippin as it leads up to Kemper. If they go through the subdivision and they cross Kemper Road over into another subdivision, Mumford Heights on the top side where they have parent pickup, driving and drop off, we would actually work with our principals and have them go through their PTAs, ask for the hot spots, and not try to pick them out ourselves. go right to the experts where they know where they are and see what we can do. And it's really going to have to be a push through the school district. I mean, I think of Robert, who was on our one of our committees, and maybe he would be interested in it, or somebody else. But we got to find folks that have some ownership for our kids. I think is going to be the best way to do it.
I have questions.
Yes, sir.
Are there any folks that are employed by the district right now that could do that first thing in the morning, like maybe an assistant? That would be the first.
You know, that's a good thought. So if we have an aide that starts at 8, if we would start them a half an hour to 45 minutes early, we could look at that cost and what it would be. And then an aide who might want to stay after school at the end of the day, but they've got to be released in time to be at that crosswalk, so they beat the kids there. But yes, those are all possibilities.
There's some safety associated with that, because they know the kids.
Sure.
Opportunity, you know.
Heck yeah. Yep. Good point. All right, so here, I'll let Chris kind of speak to this a little bit. So sidewalks. Believe me, if we could wave a magic wand and put sidewalks everywhere they need to be, they will be. But what we found through our research is we absolutely 100% have no control over who puts in the sidewalks and where they put them in. What we can do, however, is be a voice for our kids and make ourselves present to make sure they know our concerns. So Chris, you want to talk about what you found out when you talked to the 3 townships? Since we are 3 townships, Greene, Colerain, and Springfield.
Yeah, so basically we're dealing with the 3 townships, plus the county, Hamilton County, plus the state of Ohio. So typically you can think of any of the roads out there that do not have lines on them, those are probably going to be your township roads. Any of them with a center line, that's probably going to be a county road. And then naturally Colerain Avenue right through the middle is state. So trying to get something done with the state can be difficult as well as the county. We've been talking to the 3 townships. They seem like they want to work with us, so we're going to set up a meeting with the 3 townships, Hamilton County, and ourselves, sit down and talk about some of the sidewalk areas that we think that we need something. I think when you start looking at some of the maps, I've gotten a map from Colerain Township, I've gotten a nice map from Greene Township. Right now, Springfield Township does not have a good map showing their sidewalks, but they're willing to work on that with their Cages folks to see if they can get something put together so that we can review where those sidewalks are.
And Cages is a map of every street in a township, so they can place where sidewalks would be.
So I think a lot of times what you'll find looking at the maps is when they build new subdivisions, things like that, that's going to be a township road, they'll have a sidewalk leading out to a county road, and that's pretty much where the sidewalk ends. So that's where the difficulty comes, is trying to get Hamilton County to add that section of sidewalk between those subdivisions and our school district, or our school buildings. So that's where we're at right now, talking to them. I know Colerain Township, they just had a meeting probably 2 or 3 months ago where they were looking at priority sidewalks. And so they have those listed on their website. You can go take a look at those. Things like Joseph Road and Springdale, Pippin Road down by Northwest High School, some roads like that. There's also another one by Colerain Elementary that leads down towards the subdivision.
So Northwest High School, he's talking about a sidewalk from Northwest High School to Struble Road.
Struble.
And then, not to keep interrupting you, somebody asked specifically about the Pleasant Run area. Could Springfield Township look at a sidewalk from UDF back to the farms area, Forest Park on the right, Northwest on the left? Right now, there is no plans because of the bridge that's down there and the extraordinary cost, per their words. But they are willing to put the maps together and start planning. I would say, Chris, the best out of the 3, Colerain Township had plans in place, and it could at least speak to sidewalks immediately. However, they've got their top 10, and I think what it comes down to is we've got to make some appearances at zoning committees, express our concerns like some of the trustees have done individually, and see what we can do to help push the safety of our kids.
Yeah, I think Colerain Township and Greene Township both have fairly decent to look at and identify where our needs should be. One of the main things, we were trying to think of how do we identify those key sidewalks that we need to get our students to our buildings. And so right now I've been talking to the transportation department. So we have what's called no transportation boundaries. Some people like to also call them walk zone, but it's not necessarily a walk zone. It's just an area 1 mile out from the buildings that we do not provide transportation. However, in this case, in some areas we do, because there's not a good way or a safe way to get our students to the buildings. For instance, northwest Kemper, west of Pippin, we're busing a lot of kids that are closer than that 1 mile boundary, and that 1 mile boundary, we do not get funding for. So any kids that we bus that are inside that 1 mile boundary, we do not receive any funding.
And if you know Kemper and Pippin, it's probably just like a street over by Montford Heights, but you'd have to cross Kemper Road, blind spots, hills. You have to cross Pippin Road, flying up and down through there. So there's several spots like that that we are trying to work with them.
So for instance, the one that comes up and has come up at the board meeting was Wincamp that crosses West Kemper. That looks like a perfect place to put a crosswalk signs, etc. There's a lot of kids that come out of that neighborhood. They walk directly across West Kemper, through the neighborhood. We've got a sidewalk that ties into that neighborhood that leads to Pleasant Run Middle and Elementary School. The problem is I'm wrestling with Hamilton County on being able to do that. So I've got this huge list of reasons why they can't, because of the speed limit, because of the type of connector road it is between Hamilton and Pippin. So there's just a multitude of reasons why they can't. I still go back to safety. Kids are going to walk where the shortest path, right? The path of least resistance. So right now, for those kids to get over to Pleasant Run Middle School, they would have to walk all the way up West Kemper to Pippin. And then there is a very nice crosswalk there with signs. The problem is that once they cross West Kemper, it leads into someone's yard. There is no sidewalk leading back down to the neighborhood where they can walk through to the school, or along Pippin Road to the school. So we're still wrestling with them on that. And that's where maybe we can start using the community's voice to help get something done with some of those roads.
Hey Chris, that was one of my questions. Can you help us understand, help the community understand how we can help you specifically, what meetings, what townships, etc., that we as community members need to be going to?
Right.
Because we can get the word out.
Right. So one of the things I don't want to do is try to piecemeal everything.
Okay.
So using transportation, we can use our First Trans program to take a look at those boundary areas, and we can also see what kids are in those areas. So we can especially target those high volume areas where we know we've got a lot of kids that can walk to school if they have a safe path. So those are the ones that we're going to start identifying and start prioritizing which ones that we want to try to get sidewalks, crosswalks, and crossing guards at first.
But do you need community members' voices to show up at any meetings to help in that endeavor? Would that help or hinder you guys?
I think eventually it will help. Like I said, first, I want to get together with the 3 townships in the county and see where we can get with them first. And just let them know that we have this concern. I mean, it's a national concern. You see it on TV all the time. So it's just not here at Northwest. So something's got to be done, but we got to start putting something together and get that out there to them. Then if we have resistance trying to get something done and get a safe way for our kids to school, then that's when I think we can form some community members to help get the word out.
Yeah, I think it's important to get the community involved because we're not going to be a squeaky wheel. We're going to be consistent with our message. we're going to we will have done our work prior to it, instead of, it's not an ownership of, I live in this subdivision, I want sidewalks here. We're not fighting a personal battle, we're fighting for our kids. So if we come to the table with what is needed, and who better to know where sidewalks end and start and so on and so forth than our bus drivers, they can add in also, plus our transportation who takes care of the routing. And then we can also talk to our principals, our teachers, our PTAs, get feedback from them. We should have a pretty concrete list of where we need to start. The key is to get it in early, so when they plan for their budget, because they'll designate their top 10, and I've even been asked to write a letter for one of the trustees for sidewalks in certain areas. So hopefully that's a partnership that can continue and push that way. But our communication on that piece will come out from Chris, and we'll make sure we get that back out.
What's the incremental cost of not bus that mile? Bus them all. What's the incremental cost to do that?
Per student?
To the district? Million, 500,000?
I would have to calculate that.
My task for him, Rich, is exactly what you're asking. So what is it costing us to bus everyone within that mile that we're not required to? And then we need to take it to 2 miles. So when we make decisions on where funding should go and what it costs for kids, we have exact numbers and we're not bused. So we should have that for you by one of the work sessions in February or March. But no, that's a key question we want to.
Typically, every route you can look at about $60,000 to set a route up.
So I'm going to really pare it down and don't fluff it up and get the right number. And so, because we're talking about other ways to accomplish that same end. So we're looking at the cost of sidewalks, crossing guards, and all that kind of stuff. When you add that up and you look at the increment of bus, it may not be as big as you think it is.
Sure.
Well, just for instance, the neighborhood we were just talking about across West Kemper, we just had to get 2 buses over in there, so that's $120,000 right there.
Hey, Rich, were you asking what it would cost if we just bused all kids?
You don't bus them within a mile now.
Right.
Okay, so I'm not saying bus the seniors.
Oh, no, I know, not high school, but were you asking?
That mile that you are busing now, what's the real, true incremental cost of bus that?
K through 8.
For everybody.
Yep.
Compared to what it would cost to do the crossing guards and all the other things we're talking
Yeah, we're
about.
spending so much today, if we do it the whole thing,
Right.
it's gonna cost us another 250,000 more, or whatever the number is.
With the high school, we're still missing the 9th and 10th graders who are not driving age. But they're having to walk.
Right, and if we want to look into high school transportation, that's not something that's been asked, but I'd be glad to.
They're having to walk regardless at this point.
Correct.
So that's the problem that you run into when you're talking about adding more busing above and beyond what we have now. Now you're talking about adding to the fleet and adding new drivers, then it starts scaling up pretty quickly.
I'm only raising that point because.
Sure.
Yeah, no, it's a good point.
They gotta walk these streets and, they're not immune to the cars,
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, Monday when it was -6, and like, Mr. Bowling, you realize the sidewalks aren't shoveled, you realize it's -6, and I'm freezing walking to school? Yeah, I get you.
Busing, or it's also busing the parochials too.
Correct.
The rule we have for us goes to them as well. So if we were to bus high school, then we're also busing parochial high schools that are within our dental boundaries as well.
Correct.
Are we required to do that?
Yes.
State law?
Yes.
Carrie?
How much money do you guys, how much money have you guys decided you will contribute to the sidewalk plan? Because it sounds to me like all your plans are rotated about over making someone else pay for it, when you have the ability to. I just did a presentation to the Board of Trustees last week on lighting and sidewalks, and my research, and I'm fallible, says you can fill out a permit to have a sidewalk put in anywhere if you're willing to pay for it. They don't care where you get the money from. So saying that we can't do this because they won't work with us is not true. All you have to do is fill out a permit, and there's a couple criteria to meet, and as long as you're willing to pay for it, then it'll be approved unless it doesn't make any sense. But on the destination thing you were talking about, if you present it to them in stages, then they'll let you get rid of the destination section of the permit. So how much money is the district going to contribute to this project?
And the research we've done is school districts do not contribute to sidewalks anywhere in the
Any
state.
private owner, anywhere can you own.
Oh, they
the
can,
property,
but do you want,
but you also have the ability to fund it.
Sure.
So the township can come to you and ask you guys, will you chip in on this? How much are you guys willing to pay to help solve this problem?
I can tell you that so far we've paid $25,000 to Coleraine Township for a sidewalk that we didn't have to put in.
And I told them they need to give you your money back and make you put in the gosh darn sidewalk they should have put in the first place. You guys did that to save money.
That sidewalk wouldn't serve a purpose for us.
Or put it in someplace else. You should have negotiated to put a sidewalk where it was needed instead of saving money. So you guys did that.
yeah, we fought tooth and nail to get that for a sidewalk, and we were just shut down 100%.
No, you wanted to save money on your.
Oh, we did, but we
And
still,
so that saved you at least 25
but
grand.
for us to explain to you that the district paid 25,000 and got nothing out of it is a hard pill to swallow. So I agree with you, I'm just saying it a different way.
They went to the township to go to sidewalk plans, so they have $350,000 in their sidewalk fund. Will you match them? So and you guys decide to do a collaborative decision on which roads need the sidewalks the most. They got $350 to throw in, will you match them?
Depends on what the board wants to do with funding, 357 teachers. So when we break down and we look at going for a levy, we can make that part of it.
About sidewalks and what we're going to do next, if
The-
you guys
the-
aren't willing to dedicate
The
any money
question,
to it.
we didn't bring this topic up. The question was asked to us by parents who live in the community, so we're responding to their questions.
Your answer, and we've been asking for 5 months, your answer is another delay tactic, in my opinion. I want to know what you guys will do to help solve the problem. The township is willing to throw in $350. Will you match us?
No, we will not. We are in a $4.5 million spending
We have
deficit.
a $6 million surplus waiting on rebuild.
When
Coleraine Elementary.
you're not allowed to
Should we
use the
take
funds
care of
for
the
that.
safe-
You're not allowed to
safe
use the
kids
funds for
first?
that. You're not allowed to use the funds for that.
Well, we used money from the bill to redo a parking lot. Why don't we use that money, the leftover money from the construction to do sidewalks?
I'm not sure what parking lot you're talking about because that was permanent improvement funds.
Coleraine High School.
So we had extra money from the bill.
That's
Okay.
permitted with the building fund.
All right, so why can't we use that extra money? You put in the money that you spent it on from your general fund, and let's use that building money, and let's apply that to sidewalks. Because really what you're saying, folks, is, at least this is what I'm hearing, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm really wrong, but it sounds to me like you're just trying to pass the buck, literally, to someone else who doesn't have your interest. And I'm trying to say, let's work together and stop talking, and let's put some money on the table. I'm not trying to be mean, I just want to solve the problem.
I'm telling you, we have tried very hard to partner. We haven't gotten very
How
far.
much are you, just how much?
We don't have money to put on the table.
Then you're not partnering, you're choosing.
No, we're asking for the township to do what their responsibility is put in sidewalks.
Well, they don't actually have the responsibility to put it, it is their option to do it, same with the county and the state.
So if it's not a responsibility, why did they set aside funds to do it?
Because they are trying to save money to use in areas where they would need it, like, which their priority.
Which is exactly what we're talking
is
about.
the school, Coleraine High School, okay? Those kids walking in the street. We got second priority is the pathway to Northwest High School, okay? They're willing to pay for one to go to Coleraine High School. Will you guys pay for one to go to Northwest?
No, we don't have the money to do that. We can't just move money. Amy, do you want to explain any piece of this, or?
I understand how the money works. You can try to twist it around.
Oh, I'm not,
Just so you know.
that's why we're here. We're trying to be transparent.
Well, no, actually, you're saying we're going to talk about it. There's nothing to talk about if you don't have anything to put on the table.
Well, there is a plan to go and appeal to them that this is what we need for the safety of our students.
No kidding. Well, you got it. If you can't work with them if you're not going to help pay for it. I just want you to meet the township halfway. And maybe if you guys pitch in $350, they throw $350, maybe then the county will go out of their way and throw $350, and then maybe the state. That's how you build success.
Well, that's not a decision that Chris or I can make. We would have to hold forums out in the community to see if that's where taxpayers want their money to go. If they,
You have the authority to spend the district money on the sidewalk.
well, I'm sorry, the board approves all of that, so.
I know, and that's what I'm making clear, but you're just proposing to do nothing but talk, but you won't put any money on the table. That's okay, if that's your answer.
We have to spend our money on a proper public purpose, and to spend money on a sidewalk that is not on district property is not a proper public purpose.
Not according to what I read. You guys have the authority to make sure they're safe. There's actually even a program called Safe Routes to School.
Right,
Yes,
but that
to
is not
school.
through the school district, that is through a municipality.
So that's what Colerain Township worked with the county and Safe Paths to School, put in that sidewalk along Pool Road. So that's what that is.
I understand that program. I'm saying you are not prohibited from putting in a sidewalk. That's why you paid the 25 grand, because you were going to put one in.
On our property.
Right. You're allowed to put them
On our property.
On our property.
On our property.
ODOT says you can put them in anywhere you want, just fill out the permit, we don't care who pays for it.
Well, I, for one, I'm a member of the community, and I, for one, understand that that money cannot be twisted like that. And if they did have it, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. They would have done it months ago. So in my opinion, the $350,000 that you want to put on the table, I'd rather see more buses and better teachers and better education done instead of sidewalks. Sorry, I'm not trying to say there shouldn't be safety for kids, but Hamilton County, go to one of their meetings, down to their trustees, and tell them what you want, because they're the ones who are responsible if it's not on the school property. I've talked to Todd Portman at length about this. That's who you have your argument with, not the school board.
All right, let's move on to parking lot examples. We had questions about the size of parking lots, specifically PRE. Was it built to specs? Did we take money and put it somewhere else? So the parking lots meet the specs of OFCC guidelines, and they can be co-funded, which means if you, just like when we built the buildings, so we have $17 million in OFCC funds, can only be spent on a new school. The reason we got these funds is we followed OFCC guidelines, and that included the parking lot. Colerain Township zoning permits 129 stalls for cars. They call them stalls. You can call them spaces, whatever you'd like. The rule of thumb is 3 cars per classroom is how they came up with that number. We are allowed to go under this by 10% or over this by 10%. PRE had 127 regular stalls and 99 additional stalls for overflow put in for a total of 226. This is the same way, the same formula, the same method that was built or used across the state of Ohio, according to OFCC, to build new schools. There was no shortcuts. We went with the state standards and recommendations on what is used by those who build new schools in Ohio. So the following slides, we were asked to come up with some different methods of some things that could be done. Specifically, there was a problem with PRE, crowding during events. I can tell you that open house was an absolute bad choice by the 2 schools. To have open house on the same night was just a bad decision that will never happen again. To have concerts and sporting events on the same night is a bad decision also, and it accidentally happened one night and it will not happen again. So that's caused some problems with parents. If you look at these parking lots, there are a lot of lines going back and forth, hard to figure out. So one of the things we asked was an access road. Somebody brought up an access road. So we looked at 3 different ways to do this. So currently, what used to happen up here beside Pleasant Run Middle School would be the Mighty Knights practicing. They have now moved down here closer to Hamilton Avenue on a nice flat surface. If you look at the demolition, the parking lot has stayed so they can stay there practicing. So one is to come on down through here, hook into the parking lot and have access to Hamilton Avenue. Another one was to come down around this side, hook into the parking lot, and the other was to come all the way around and go here. We don't have exact pricing yet, unless, Chris, you've heard different. You could be looking at anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 for access roads to be put in. Purpose of the access roads is there were some questions about would that help with dismissal. So that's why we're pricing those out to get an idea of what it would cost. The next one, and this is hard to see, is additional parking lots. So the first area they looked at is at the front of PRMS, and it is where Mighty Knights used to practice. So they looked at this, adding an additional 70 spots, 75 spots, and then kind of looked at an additional spot coming between the two buildings. And so what would be the best? The cost, if you look at these little wiggly lines that are going down here, the closer the lines are, the steeper the grade is. So the wider the lines are, the flatter the property is. So obviously trying to set it on the flattest surface we can do.
And what's the cost of that parking lot?
It's going to be, I don't know right now, but we were told it's about $5,000 per spot stall.
So 70 spots is 350,000.
Correct. I asked, is there any way to repaint the parking lot? So can you cover it all with a black coat? Can we put in lines that are more usable? So the buses, and because I reduced this, it still looks like chaos, but on a regular size screen, there are full bus slips. All the buses spots would be right up next to the school. We only have 2 sets of spots going down through here right now. I asked, can we move them closer, and can we get spots here? So now we would have all these spots along the back fence, all these spots along the front of the building, and double the spots in the middle. And we could do that all the way down, and that would increase us by about 50 or 60 spots by just repainting it. So what it comes down to is there are options, all of which cost money, but we have to look at it 2 ways. I can tell you the 2 schools did not schedule appropriately. Putting open house on the same night was not a good idea. But nobody knows what it's like to have a 900 student school until you have one. Then you can see what's going on. There has been concerns from PRE, PTA, and just casual conversations when I went to the PTA meeting. Well, Todd, what if we want to have an all-school PTA meeting and we want all the parents to show up here? Is there still enough parking for that to occur? I think if they're the only one in place and nothing's going on at PRMS, I think between the front of PRMS, the front of PRE, the sides on both buildings, I think there's enough parking. But the last thing we want is danger in our parking lots. The last thing we want is people parking in the mud and getting stuck. And the last thing we want is the perception that the school parking lots were not built big enough. So it comes down to where do we find the funds if we want to extend parking lots, or do we want to try to make these adjustments with painting the parking lot and seeing how that works for the remainder of the year, maybe over spring break, because that cost is going to be a lot less than.
Any idea how much?
I have to find out.
We can check, but
We can do most of it ourselves.
Because it sounds like that'd be like 10 to 15 less spots than the 350,000 to put in one parking lot.
And when we talked about the access roads, we really want to work with the community. The Mighty Knights have a good space down there. We think we can make it larger so more teams can practice down there. We have a good parking lot. We have a good access into that parking lot. The road itself that's another piece that we'll have to hopefully have for you by the time we come back to the next meeting. Remember, we had our meeting January 7th, so by the time you get the architects out to look at it, Kleiningers, they just don't have the exact prices yet. So, and anytime, usually if you'll talk to people around who are putting in parking stalls, $3,000, but because of you don't know what that surface is over there and you've got to flatten it out, that's why the prices of the stalls were higher.
Todd, with that property being for sale, I mean, with the Mighty Knights moving down closer to Hamilton Avenue, is there a chance, is that part of the property that we'll have for sale along with where the old building was?
Depending on what they want. Right now, we have had absolute zero interest. We're advertising, realtors. We've had no bites on it whatsoever. But if they would be interested in that, then we got to first think, what are we going to do with Mighty Knights now, and then see what that parking lot is.
And right now, it's a really good field for rentals for soccer.
Yeah, it's nice.
Todd, this is
Yes.
from over this area. I actually was looking at the area that was east of Pleasant Run Elementary. It has like a dip down, there's a flat area down there.
But you were talking sidewalks, correct?
No, this is parking lot.
Where our football field's gonna be?
Down over the hill.
There's like 2 extra tiers.
Yeah, it goes down, levels off, then goes down again.
Yeah, so this is the part that goes down, levels off the football field, and then that area right
They
there.
practice right
Eventually, there will be a football
Oh.
/ soccer,
I
yeah,
didn't know they were playing.
that whole area. We're trying to grow in grass this year, so nobody's on it right now.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that's something.
I like what you guys are doing, and I'll stand up for it. It looks like the right studies are being made, from my perspective, okay? The only thing I would say is, there's any way you can get a sense on, if you put the extra road in, how much traffic is gonna be reduced? If we could make that study, then we know if we should consider it. But I mean, I think you're looking at the right things. I think you just have to cost them out, you know, and then meet again and say, you know, here's what we can get for 50, and here's what we can get for 10, and
This is what it will get you.
this is what it'll get you. But I think it's the right kind of way to look at it. That's my perspective.
Questions from anybody else? So we will get prices on these. We will, I'm sorry, go ahead.
My daughter's a bus aide for the handicapped kids that go to all the elementary schools. And that is the school she complains about the most. Trying to get those kids into that school, into that parking area. She said she don't have a bus driver does what she does with all the traffic, with the students, so I don't know, I mean, I'm not a map person, but how close are you gonna be able to get the buses back up closer to the school without all the other traffic? When you said you're gonna line them a different way?
Well, no cars are allowed on this side when the buses are there. Those are buses only, that whole bottom section you see there. So I think this has a laser. This right here is all buses. No cars are allowed there at dismissal or drop off.
Okay, I wonder, because she says at Taylor, because she knows this is really, at Taylor, she said the access is pretty simple, and it's pretty, got to get through the bus and the teacher, but she said at PRE, it's
At Taylor, it is a lot, I think, shorter and not as open because you have access of Pleasant Run Middle School as you come down through there also. So just let Dustin, we can check.
In the mornings, they come right to the curb and drop off right there at the doors. In the afternoons, they're right at the curb. The only people there are buses and buses, period.
Could be that buses are late when you had 16 drivers out like we did earlier this week. Buses were doubling up, so maybe they were late getting there and that's the difficulty. The good news we have is there has been complaints that it is very dark on Pippin Road as you're turning into PRE and PRMS. So we will look at lighting being installed by the county and Duke Energy over the next 2 weeks. So you should see light posts popping up on those 2 areas.
Actually, Colerain Township.
So Chris, you worked with them. You asked for assistance. They worked with us.
Yeah, I worked with both the township and the county. Kind of went back and forth a little bit. And originally, they wanted us to install additional pole lights up closer to the road. But the reason we couldn't do that was because the township zoning does not allow the lights to be installed closer to the road. So they just stepped up and worked with Duke and Hamilton County. And since the township already pays for a lot of street lights throughout their area, they agreed to go ahead and put those 2 lights in, and they're paying for that.
So on all of these that were listed, we need to get together with Raj, Dan, and Greg. Now, obviously, only one of them can meet at a time. 2 cannot be together, but continue conversations with Jeff Miltz and the new Jeff that was hired, and we'll try to work on all these issues. Sidewalks, anything that we can partner with. We've still got the Duke Energy project on Colerain Avenue to partner with them and talk about. And so we have many things to talk to them about. So we'll continue to try to get with them and have those conversations. Yes?
When was that, when did you get word that was approved by them? I'm grateful, I think that's awesome, but when did you get word that was approved?
3 or 4 weeks ago.
All right. Amy's got a presentation on funding sources. So we are going to start this. This part is our trail to leading to what will be a fiscally responsible levy to put up in the fall of 2020. I do, however, want to address one thing that was all over the media. So it was brought to my attention by teachers, administrators, several people that Forest Hills did a really cool thing where the superintendent got on there and said, we listened to our community, and they said they didn't want to levy. Well, I need everybody to understand why their community doesn't trust them. Folks need to realize, if you'll go research the articles, the treasurer and business director had an affair. Those pictures got published. They were let go. It wasn't about raising millage for a levy, and it wasn't about anything to do in what we're starting the discussion with. Our discussion is we could have, and as we look back, we could have put a levy up this year, but we heard loud and clear from our parents and our staff that this wasn't the year to do it. So that's why we are looking at fall 2020. Now we need to talk to everyone and make sure there's a clear understanding of, have we been fiscally responsible? Have we made the necessary adjustments we need to make? And what has led to where we are today? And that's where the expert, Ms. Wells, is there, and she can cover it. There'll be plenty of time for questions and answers also, because some of this is very deep and difficult to understand.
Todd, you said put a levy up in fall 2020, you mean 2019?
2019, my bad.
Okay.
1920 school year, fall 2019.
So we're going to do a brief overview on school funding because it is a complicated subject. So we're going to start 10,000-foot level. So where does our money come from? Well, the state of Ohio determines the school funding formula. And what they're determining is what it costs to fund the basic education needs of a student. So this is only for the basic, the bare minimums for public education. And what they look at is the local wealth in a school district. What ability do the residents have to fund and support their public school district? So for Northwest, we're slightly right of the middle at a 60-40 split. 60% locally, 40% from the state, and this is determined by the state of Ohio. So they are requiring our local community to support our public school district by 60% of the formula. So this comes from our local property taxes. So over the years, we have passed 52.72 mills locally. In 1976, we're required to pass a minimum of 20 mills. Every school district in the state is required to do that. And then since then, we passed levies in 86, 89, 97, and then in 2007, we have an emergency levy, which we've renewed twice in 12 and 17, for a total of about $44 million. However, when levies are passed, the dollar amount that that levy generates the year the levy is passed is frozen or flat. It never increases. So the amount of revenue that we receive from the 1976 levies, we receive today. 1986, that's the amount we receive today. It's kind of like these are the years the district received a raise and no increases in between. So the current state formula calculates the Northwest local school district's bare minimum state minimum budget to be $85 million. Of that, the state's 40% should be around $34 million. But they have the ability to cap with the amount that they pay. They'll pay you up to a certain percentage of what you received last year. So we only received $30 million of the $34 that they owe us. And they will never pay us the difference of what they owe. Locally, we should be receiving $51 million from the community, or $54 million to make up for the difference that the state does not pay. But we are receiving $44 million from the levies that we have passed to date. This leaves a shortfall of 4 mills or $6 million for the basic education of our students, or $9 million, or about 6 mills, when you look at what the state has capped us and is not paying per their obligation. So when it comes to levies, first thing you hear, why do you need a levy? Are you being wasteful? But the way school funding works, it's not why you need a levy or when you need a levy. It's how much your levy is going to be and how often you go back out for a levy. That's the way the school funding formula works in the state of Ohio. So the thing to think about is, to pass a levy, you think about how long you need it to last for. Community, do you want it to last for 5 years? Do you want it to last for 10 years? How long should this levy last for? And then you look at the middle. What do we project expenditures to be in the middle of that time frame? And that's the amount of a levy. You get a little more at the beginning to pay for the little over at the end, but it lasts for that time frame. And then you have to go back out for another levy because expenses increase and revenue is flat until you pass another levy. This is the way the state of Ohio funds schools. So where does our money go? 76% of our budget goes to fund personnel, salaries and benefits. We're a service industry. We're here to provide education for our students. 20% is purchase services. But most of that, or 68% of that 20% piece of the pie, is to fund our students who are going somewhere else. They're either open enrolled somewhere, they're going to a charter community school, procure scholarships that are being paid out, tuition payments for court place students, or special needs tuition payments.
So Amy,
Yes.
not to interrupt, so with, when Struble becomes a choice, and if any students qualify for that, that will increase.
That'll increase that purchase service line. And if it's up to $4,600 for the scholarship, 60% or about $2,800 is going to come from the local tax dollars that we receive already to fund students here. They'll now take it with them. We won't get an increase in revenue. It's revenue we already have that is going. So we have an increased need here for literacy, and then money could be diverted elsewhere. 3% of our budget is spent on supplies. And the other 1% is what the county charges us to bill and collect local property taxes on our behalf. And again, as we've talked in the past, is if you look backwards and you look at the projections forwards, the pie stays pretty much the same. We're very consistent. Our expenditures don't increase very much year to year. It's about that 3% inflationary rate, but it's typically the same process every year. Items that are part of the budget that we cannot control are inflation, student enrollment, up or down, judicial actions, legislative actions. The state changes the biennial budget every 2 years, and sometimes in March they'll just say we don't have money and we're not going to pay you what we owe you, or recession time, or different unfunded mandates. I mean, there's constantly something changing legislatively or judicially that causes us to have increased costs. Things that we can control are staffing levels to a point. Some of that's restricted by law. Salaries, again, there is a minimum salary schedule. We have negotiated agreements. There's things like that, but to a point that is controllable by the district. We've done a lot to try to get our salaries to the minimum or to the middle of the surrounding schools. We were at the bottom, so we've tried to retain, recruit, and reward our staff by trying to get those salaries up a bit. Program offerings, some are required, others we offer because we want to. They're above the state minimums, things that our community and our students want us to have and we want to be able to provide opportunities for. Those are not funded by the state, those are 100% funded locally. Transportation services, as Chris had mentioned, you know, that 1 mile out is not funded, so there are 2 mile minimums, no high school busing versus high school busing. There are some restrictions. And then the discretionary spending, about 3 to 5% of our budget, supplies, fuel, toilet paper, Post-its, paper clips, things like that.
And Amy, again, what percentage do we get reimbursed for transportation from the state?
It's at our state share, which is 40%.
And it used to be
60%.
And
We lose about $1 million a year, just in the state, just changing the way they've changed the funding formula 2 years ago. So we have right-sized our staffing levels. We've looked to determine what should our student-teacher ratios be in the elementary, kindergarten versus 5th grade, different needs. We've addressed our salaries, again, as I said, to reward, recruit, and retain our staff. We're analyzing our program offerings to make sure we're fiscally accountable to our community while offering the experiences our students need. We've maximized our transportation services and also looking out for safety of our students. And we're analyzing our discretionary spending, and we're asking, how does this purchase impact our students? So we're aligning our financial expenses to our instructional goals. And this comes right off our report card. I know we've spent past hour talking about where we've been, but now let's look at where we're going. We are in the lowest 20% for operating expenditures in the state of Ohio, and we're in the highest 20% of performance, which means our students are growing. We may be low, we've got a long way to go, but we're growing or we're getting there, and we're doing it at one of the lowest costs. So we have needs, we're being fiscally responsible with our budget. The state of Ohio determines how schools are funded, and we're working within those mechanisms.
I think the key to that slide right there is the community's feedback to the board. Do you want to stay being in the lowest 20% for what it costs to educate a student? And when you see, she compares what we spend per pupil compared to what the state average is, we're well below that. We're obviously in the lowest 20%, but we have to get that up so we can put more toward good, proven, sound academic instructional strategies that have been shown to show academic improvement from internally here, from other school districts, from best practices that give our kids the chance to compete on the same level. Are you going back to that slide where it showed the levies we passed?
I will in 1 second.
I'll stop there.
First, I wanted to talk about this.
Yep.
As Todd just said, the levies we passed, 1976, 1986, 1989, 1997, and 2007. We're currently operating and educating our students on the funding of the past, and we're trying to get our students to the future.
So to me, and I'm going to let Amy explain it, this is the most important slide you've ever seen in our district. If you've lived in our district, and this goes back to when I started school in 1969, so my parents went through these levies. So what I want you to understand is, whatever this levy was, my parents moved into our house about 68. So in 76, let's say the value of my parents' home was $24,000. They only paid $11,000 for it. It was the corner of Pippin and Houston, so right down the road. And then when we sold it about 5 years ago, my dad passed and then mom moved in with us, we sold it for $110,000. Well, common sense would say, well, you're getting taxes off the $110,000. No. You're getting taxes over whatever the value was in the year the levy was passed. So it's, people will say, well, my taxes are going up. Well, a lot of our funding, majority of our funding comes from taxpayers. But also realize there's fire levies out there, there's police levies, which we agree we need just like we do. We will support them and we hope they support us, and I know they do. But there's mental health services out there. There's other things that can raise taxes, much less the value of your property is going up. So as the value of your property goes up, you pay more taxes. We're trying to show you we're not getting those taxes. So as property value is being judged and estimated, and it's worth this, this, and this, this is why TIFs are so important. Because we go a length of time without money or collecting taxes from the properties that are TIFed. So every little TIF starts to add in. But this is key. So the last time we really asked for new money from our taxpayers was 2007. 12 and 17 were a renewal. Taxes that were already in place, they can't change, or whatever their value was at the original amount. But 2007 was the last time we got new money. So 12 years of fiscal responsibility, 12 years of doing what we're supposed to do, and now what's coming down is it's causing us, which is a good thing, we have a low per pupil expenditure, but we're not even up with the state average. Yet, we're required to do the same things, provide the same services, but at a much less cost. So it comes down to what do you want for our kids? I know what we all want for our kids is every kid needs to succeed. Doesn't matter what ethnicity, it doesn't matter what your disability might be, it doesn't matter any home life you come from. You deserve the right to get a good education, to be successful and have goals and jobs when you get out of here. So for 12 years, no new funds. We built 3 new schools. We've got 17 million banked in Ohio because of the OFCC. So if we could get the rest of those funds, we could basically build Colerain L, Colerain Middle for about $5–6 million and have a brand new state-of-the-art school just like the 3 new ones.
But the operating need is not due to building 3 new schools.
No, has nothing to do
That
with
was just brick and mortar, that's a separate bond. We would still need operating funds if we were in our old buildings or in our new buildings. Our new buildings are more efficient and will get us further in the long run, but the operating need is not due to new schools.
When the board moved that 10 million toward the new schools, it had to be used on that or it went away, is the way. How did we explain that in case people have questions about that?
We had 2 emergency levies at that point, and we were pretty much overtaxing the community. We had built up a reserve. We let the 1 emergency levy go and the community to have the buildings instead. And the board partnered with the community to spend that $10 million, one-time money, for the building bonds instead of asking for $86 million as a levy. It was $76 million levy, and to use the $10 million that had already been collected from the community towards the project. So it was a partnership with the community.
Can you go back a slide with the state funding formula? Or forward a slide, I'm sorry. Where you had that, yeah. The formula is calculating minimums.
Minimum.
So that's not adding in gifted services. That's not, the state's not calculating funding and giving us money for underperforming students for the 3rd grade reading guarantee, athletics, arts, AP courses. So that's all basic funding. The other stuff that we have is stuff that the community wants and has funded through levies that we're looking at and coming back to the community saying, do you still want it? Do you want more of it? What do you want the schools to be represented as? The state's only looking at it at bare minimum.
Yes. Crossing guards, safety, security, social, emotional, none of that is in the state formula. That is all locally funded.
I just want to throw something out there. I play the devil's advocate because I'm the older person whose taxes keep going up, and that's who that sell is to me. When I got my tax bill in January, because my house is paid off, I'm for the school levy, so don't take this personally, or I'm playing the devil's advocate. 52% of my tax bill goes to Northwest School District.
Right. And that is because of House Bill 920 in 1976, which required every district in the state to pass 20 mills. Pretty much every resident or property owner in the state pays about 50% of their property taxes to fund their local school district. And that is determined by the state of Ohio.
That's a key point in your selling this levy for this fall, because most people, all they see is, well, you're already getting 52%, now you want more. That's what they have to understand, exactly what you're saying. That was in 1976, that money stays flat.
And the reason we've had additional is because of this.
Right.
So in 1976, they require 50% to come to your school, and then they determine that the wealthier you are as a community, the more you're required to fund your local public school district. So again, it's all based on the state of Ohio. And then right here, this reduction factor, this is what's passed by the community. This is what the county charges, so that we still collect the same dollar amount. So in total, your property may go up in value, someone else's has gone down, so that the county can collect the same dollar amount. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Questions about her presentation? So to let the board know, Amy and I have put together a video that pretty much covers the same thing that we're going to start disseminating on social media through Facebook, Twitter, anything that we think is out there. One Call Now, we can send out an attachment that'll go directly to it through email. If we can figure out a way to send it via text, we'll do that also, so they can just click it on their phone and watch the presentation. Trying to make them 3 to 4 minutes, something that will be catchy, something that will get their attention, do a series of videos to cover this aspect of it. So that's one of the avenues we're going to try to do here. So look tomorrow for that to be released out. If you have suggestions, I'd like to say we are expert filmmakers. I do have a parent who does this for a living, and so he has offered to critique the films as we do them. So we're going to gather their feedback, and just like the point you brought up, when you look at your tax bill, what's confusing you? If something needs to go on out, a 2-3 minute video showing a tax bill of any homeowner in our district and a brief description, that's what we want to get out there. We want to create a base of information on our website so you can click on it and see. But as we go through here, now the starting point is through the next couple of work sessions is, what are you spending money on as a district? What are you, where are you putting money? And how are you going to tell me the staffing you have is adequate if the results don't match? Are you looking at best practices? Are you looking at things that are working? So the first thing I want to go over, because it's the first thing that always comes up, is fiscal responsibility. And so I wanted to go over what we have done as a district, basically this is the 4th year for myself and Amy, what we've done since 2015. And I need to walk my stuff over here to get this. Thank you. So the first thing we've done is we reduced administrator contracts. We had contracts that were $260, we reduced them down to $247. Assistant principals, some were reduced from $247 to $212. But what was your purpose? Why did you do this? Were you wasting money all this time? Well, I had had secondary experience. I had seen that when working in a high school, a size of Northwest, and remember Colerain is double that size, is that not everybody has to be there year-round. Other districts, and we looked at close for the month of July. Other districts go anywhere when Stephanie and Daryl did the research, anywhere from 190-day contracts to 260. This is what we came out and thought it was essential for each high school. So each high school has a principal, 247, and AD is year-round, believe it or not, checking eligibility and everything else, so they're 247. You need somebody to do the master schedule. It takes basically the entire summer, and there is 2 of them at Colerain High School because it's double the size and double the class offerings. All other assistants were hired or made a 212 or hired as a 212, and then we tried to align our secretaries the same way. The lead secretary who works with the principal, 247, 2 at Colerain High School, 1 at Northwest, due to Colerain High School again being double the size. A level 4 secretary at 212. A counseling secretary has to be there year-round if you ask why. Transcripts need to go out. Getting everything together, and there's a constant request for information from the counselor's office. And then a career center secretary only needs to be there right at the beginning of school and right at the end of the school to finish up all career center, and that's Butler Tech, in case you're wondering. Total savings administrative, by reducing contracts, we saved $180,000. Total savings for secretaries, we saved $106,000. We did administrators first, and then secretaries we did last year. So those are the 2 savings there. This is, again, just another reason why we did it during the summer months. There was no need for a secretary to be there, just like assistant principals. OP5s, however, do all the orders, do all the accounting, do all the banking. They are there and basically doing a full-time 12-month job. There is no downtime for them. The importance of their job in our new schools, if you've been in them, the OP5 has assigned times where they will go to a back room and do their work because of counting money, taking in money, collecting money from the PTA, making deposits, so on and so forth. There's just a lot of really important job responsibilities that go with our OP5s. Administrative office flow chart. First thing to say is, I'm not voting for a levy. You're heavy in central office. You've got too many administrators. So I want to talk about some of the things we've done here. We have reduced 1 full assistant director from curriculum. That was Michael Holbrook, who is now the superintendent of Hampton City Schools. There is his savings. We reduced HR by 1, but we added a position, so there is no reduction there whatsoever. We Removed Northwest Passage principal. They will no longer need a principal. We are also looking at an alternative location for that building. It's $3,000 a month, so that's $36,000 a year that we feel we can spend better upon our students. We will still have Northwest Passage, but it will be in one of our buildings that we already have in place, and it will not require a full-time principal. We reduced the technology supervisor. This has been a very tough one. We have 9,000 students, which means we have 9,000 laptops or Chromebooks. We did not replace Dennis. Matt Fisher is in charge of technology, and then he has 5 techs underneath him, really 4.5 because one's part-time. That's for 2 high schools, 3 middle schools, and 5 elementaries, 9,000 students. It's probably not where it needs to be. We reduced 1 supervisor in maintenance and also reduced 2 maintenance positions. We obviously felt opening new schools, you shouldn't need as much maintenance. So that made common sense. So as we went through opening the new schools, we reduced those positions. We reduced an assistant principal at Northwest High School. We reduced dean of students at Colerain L and Colerain Middle. Colerain L went from an enrollment of 970 down to an enrollment of 660. Colerain Middle School, they knew we were going to reduce deans this year, and when he resigned at the beginning of the year because he and his wife moved to another state because she got a new job, we cut that position. So between the dean of students at Colerain L and Colerain Middle, that was 130. So Diane had a good point the other night. Todd, what is a dean? What is the role of a dean? What do they do? How are they different from an assistant principal? A dean is paid on a teacher's contract. They do discipline only. They are not allowed to evaluate teachers because they don't have the right certification. So they will deal with student discipline on a daily basis. They can arrange small groups to work on certain things. They can evaluate all classified employees, classified as secretaries, custodians, aides, secretaries. So they do have that ability to evaluate them. Total reductions at AO was 1 full cut, but the total savings from everything that's up there is $705,000. So we have made continuous cuts and not just done everything in 1 year. These are already in place and finished. So the first thing people say is, you're overstaffed administrative, so we decided to compare ourselves to these school districts. And you might say, oh yeah, right, look who they compared us to. Well, we just took what ODE said. These are the schools that are the most comparable to you. Three Rivers is not, but Oak Hills, Fairfield, Northwest Plains, Local, and Huber Heights are. So Oak Hills has 7,400 students, 860 employees. Fairfield has 9,200 students, 1,202 employees. Northwest, 9,082. I think you can read those from back there. So what we did is a comparison. Everybody has a superintendent. Everybody has a treasurer. This third line is assistant treasurer. Northwest, Oak Hills, and Huber Heights does, but because it's not called an assistant treasurer, doesn't mean that it's not. This was the hard part when Darryl was putting this chart together. To find exact names is very difficult. Assistant superintendent, all but Huber Heights Wayne. Director of HR, whether it's a director or just called human resources person, everybody has that. But again, when you get down to names, it all changes. A director of curriculum, director of instructional accounts, director of learning innovation, and on and on. And then further down, some departments are different. So you look, we have a director of curriculum, and then we have a director of instructional accountability. So we have Stephanie and Brenda. Fairfield will say they have 1. You go to their next page, though, in curriculum, and they have 11 additional people in curriculum only, all paid at administrative salary. So it's not the clearest look, but the names is what causes it to be different. So if you look, Northwest has 11 directors, assistant directors, Fairfield 20, or I'm sorry, these added together. 11, 20, 11, 3, and 6. If you look at flow charts, this is our flow chart. Starts with the assistant or treasurer, assistant treasurer, superintendent, assistant superintendent. Anything in yellow is paid out of federal and state funds, or not general fund, but federal funds. Anything in blue is a teacher contract, so 2, 4, 6 people total are paid on that level. Ones that are in orange are the directors, or salmon. I'm not sure what color that is. And then we have our curriculum supervisor, our district data, our assistant director. And then you'll see on some of these other charts, under Chris McKee alone are all of these departments. He's in charge of maintenance, he's in charge of technology, he's in charge of food service, and his favorite, transportation. As you look at curriculum, curriculum has a K-12 math instructional specialist. We then have a social studies and special area instructional specialist. Technology, we have one technology support specialist for 1,202 employees, all of which are required to use a computer on a daily basis. We have one person. Literacy coach K through 5, literacy coach 6 through 12. You compare this to Three Rivers, you can see as you look at directors and assistant directors, they have about the same amount, yet they have a student population of 3,500. When it's more closer to what we are size-wise, this is Oak Hills. All of these are central office administrators. Now, some of them fall like we do under business operators, so here's food service, transportation, those two fall there. Communications coordinator, and going back to that chart, I'm not sure they're all called the same, but there was Director of Community Relations, which is a communication person here and here. It's called something different at Three Rivers. They have their own. Oak Hills has their own. We are the only school district that does not have a communications director. So my point was to show you where we are. So you still might sit there and say, hey, we feel like administratively you're overstaffed. You know, we're willing to look at anything. If we're going to look at our staffing for classified, we're going to look at our staffing for certified, and we're going to look at our staffing for administration. We have to make decisions on which way we're going to go, and that becomes the hard part. So as we go through this journey, and the last thing I want to put up here tonight is the spreadsheet for school staffing. And this shows you what the makeup of our buildings looks like. Oh man, that's going to be impossible to see. So, I think you know enrollment, and we will put all this out on the internet and our website so you can see it. Colerain's at 1,900, Northwest is at 900. Our three middle schools are 778, 777, 636, Colerain Middle being the smallest. Our two elementaries, Montford Heights and Colerain, are about 620. And then our three elementary schools are at 907 for Pleasant Run, 965 for Struble, and 902 for Taylor. What I want you to look at is administration to staff evaluation. Our two high schools is 19 to 1 and 14 to 1. Our middle schools are 23 to 1, 29 and 28 to 1. Our two elementaries are 20 to 1. So pretty similar to these, or somewhere in the middle. Our three new elementaries are at about 29 or 30 to 1 each. There is no more important job than an administrator evaluating teachers. That's where you change instruction. That's where you assist them. You give them the supports they need. The other number I want you to look at is how many students do they have to deal with this one? Well, Colerain High School, it's one administrator for 364 kids. Northwest, it's 1 to 194 kids. The middle schools, 260 for the two that are the same size, 212 for Colerain, so that's one administrator for 212 kids. Our two elementaries, Colerain and Montford Heights, 1 to 304, 1 to 318. But then you get to our three new elementaries, and it's one administrator to 450 kids. Now, the thing you have to understand about elementary is high school can sometimes go through discipline pretty quickly. You skip the class, you cut school, you got in a fight, you cut somebody out. Yes, we need to be restorative. Yes, we need to deal with those, but it takes a lot more time to deal with all the issues that are going on with elementary kids. It takes a lot more meeting time. It takes a lot more time to put them in a place where they're going to be safe and they have to deal with things. And what we found out this year is staffing with two administrators in those three new elementary buildings is a mistake. They need more. So my point of starting the story tonight is there's going to be two ways we can go for this levy. is my recommendation to the board. One is, if it doesn't pass, these are the cuts that have to be made. So we will bring back to the board from working with small groups, these are the recommendations and how we get to $5 million. And that can conclude anything from raising class sizes. It could be to reducing the amount of aides in buildings. It could be taking transportation back to 2 miles. And if you don't live within 2 miles, you have to get your own self to school. These are all the hard decisions that have to be made. The other avenue is we've got to come up with a number. What do we need in order to take care of our spending deficit of $5 million each year, and it'll compound next year? And what would we like to see our school staffed with? I can tell you right now there is a strong need for the 3 elementary schools to have a dean of students in each of those schools. There's a strong need to have an extra counselor in each of those schools. Now, that's not a decision Todd Bowling's going to make. That's a decision where we're going to meet with the community, gather their feedback, present the information to the board, and then try to make decisions. Our job, in case the community and the parents aren't aware, is to give information to the board so they can make well-informed decisions. Some of them are already attending some of the meetings. I know Diane attends my SAC meeting, which is my Student Advisory Committee. We'll be doing a communication audit report Thursday. I know some are coming to that. I have a VIP meeting that meets every other month. Very important people. So we've had anywhere from 6 attend up to 35 attend. And then I'm also going to start a new committee that will be spread out amongst the district every month, once a month, at 4 different schools where any and all complaints and concerns or thank yous can come and discuss what's going on at those meetings, and then we can also give you information about what good things are going on in the district, because there's a lot of great things going on here. So those will be going out. So we are in a gathering information mode, but the recommendation we bring back to the board is the cuts, and the cuts will just be a lot. They'll be hard. They will be a lot of cuts that if this doesn't pass in the fall of 2019, we don't want threats. The one things my 2 committees have said is don't come and threaten us. Just tell us what we're going to lose if it doesn't pass. And tell us what does it mean. And to really look at how do you improve education. But they also say they understand Amy's story. We're in the lowest 20% in the state for funding per pupil. I think we're at $8,200, and I think the state average is $9,300. So we have some ground to make up. And by passing a levy that puts in place what we need at all our schools, and think about it. So we were at the bottom. We were replacing teachers left and right 4 years ago. One year it was 160, 1 year it was 80, 1 year it was 90. We now have it to where this past year, Daryl, we replaced how many? 40. We now have the salary where it's in the top 50%. If we want to keep these teachers and keep them here, then there has to be some things built in for raises to come in for the teaching staff. That's the bottom line if you want to keep good people. But we don't want to just throw things that you don't think are supported and well researched. We want to work with you. And the meeting doesn't end tonight. If you get home and you think about something, or you want an answer to something, or you want me or Amy to come and meet you and your 2 neighbors at your house or somewhere for coffee, call. We'll be there. We will do anything and everything you want to do. I am trying my best to reach out to parochials. I got into St. Ives. I have a board member going with me. Joe's going to go with me. I'm doing anything I can do to get in St. James. I haven't been allowed to yet, but I'm still trying. So we want to meet with every aspect of our district because we have a great district. We have great public schools. We have great parochial schools, but we've got to get input from the community. So this is the start of it. In February, we'll come back with more information on academics, what we're putting in place and what it takes to improve academics. And then we have to look at staffing. Daryl's going to meet with Amy and I, get a staffing plan together, decide and have talks with the community. What should the class size of a 1st grade classroom look like? What should the class size of a 7th grade classroom look like? What should the class size of a 12th grade classroom look like? I know we have some AP classes right now, which is your top kids in your district sitting with 6 to 9. But I tell you what, the minute you stop offering those classes, guess where those 6 to 9 are going to go? Somewhere else. What do we do for our AP students? Most of what you saw that was up there tonight, they need to improve their scores. Yes, we do, and we will. And so we're looking at double blocking them in English, double blocking them in math, doing anything we can to put strategies in place to improve our students' performance. So that was the purpose of tonight's meeting. Hope you got a lot. I can answer any questions you have now. Otherwise, that's all we have for a presentation. Thanks.